Cities have been rearranged. There's been kilometre after kilometre of tunnelling. Millions of tons of earth and rock have been moved. Hundreds of new bridges now reach across the skyline. Construction teams worked on 65 sites simultaneously. It's all for the Gautrain, Africa's first high-speed rail system.
At any given day, there's about 10,500 people working on the Gautrain. We spend about 3 million rand an hour. So every day when we go home, we've spent 30 million. On bad months, we spend about 50 million a day.
Gauteng, South Africa. The name means place of gold, a reference to its abundant mineral wealth. South Africa's largest city, Johannesburg, and the country's administrative capital, Pretoria, are both situated here. Growth has soared since the end of apartheid, with political freedom unlocking the region's potential. Although relatively small in geographic terms, Gauteng generates over 10% of Africa's GDP. It's the continent's unrivaled economic powerhouse. Renewed prosperity is drawing people to Gauteng like a second gold rush. But the rapidly growing population is putting pressure on existing infrastructure. In a country where the car is king, roads are now chronically overburdened. South Africa's busiest highway, the N1 between Johannesburg and Pretoria, is like a clogged artery. Driving between the two cities can take up to 2 hours in peak hour traffic. And they're only 50 kilometers apart.
If I look at the future of Gauteng and I look at the present reality, I have no doubt that if we don't build 10 Gautrains in the next 10 years, we're going to be dead, we're going to suffocate.
We had Metro Rail, but unfortunately it was designed in the 1950s and 60s. It was very old technology, and the rail wasn't going where we actually wanted it to go.
Gautrain is being punted as the solution to the gridlock and a further stimulus to economic growth. The network connects Johannesburg and Pretoria with the busiest airport in Africa, OR Tambo. Hugely ambitious, it spans an 80-kilometer route. And unusual for a project of this size, it's been built entirely from scratch amid the clutter of 2 major cities. But there were questions whether rapid rail was such a priority in South Africa.
It was a massive investment in capital of around 30 billion rand. Are there not other more pressing issues in South Africa? For instance, we've got 1 million families that don't have houses.
Imposing such a vast railway system on a metropolis was always going to be contentious. People had to be uprooted to allow the Gautrain to follow the most practical route. In a country with a history of forced removals for political reasons, the issue still touches a raw nerve. Angry property owners took legal action.
The amount which has been given to us or has been offered is nothing. It's actually, it's pittance, as a matter of fact. What we would like to do is, if it means that we have to go to the highest level in court, that's exactly what we're going to do. And that's definitely going to stop the train then.
We know how emotive land is and the land ownership aspects are in South Africa, given our history, and government took responsibility for that.
We had many public meetings, of which some got quite heated.
We will compensate because we are expropriating. We're not simply just, you haven't put your house up for sale.
People are concerned what happens. Generally, but especially if it is in their backyard or close to their homes. And we get the NIMBY effect, not in my backyard.
4, 3, 2, 1, blow down.
It was an engineering colossus by any estimation, and there were headaches to match.
The joke we used to make is that every morning when we drove to the project office, you always wondered, what is the new problem for the day?
Initial cost estimates for the Gautrain rocketed. This fueled criticism that the money could have been better spent upgrading transport infrastructure for poor commuters.
At the time that you're planning these big projects, you should be thinking of alternatives. You could actually move the same number of people that they'd estimated by using minibuses along a dedicated lane on the Ben Schoeman at a much, much smaller cost.
In Trevor Manuel's mini-budget speech at the end of 2005, in November, he said that the Gautrain would cost the country 21 billion rand. Our contingent liability was that. The newspapers had kept saying 7 billion, so in one speech, it was, the project was taken from a 7 billion rand project to a 21 billion rand project.
When the concession agreement was finally signed and construction started, that was all on the same day. The concession agreement was signed early in the morning of the same day. We had a big party which sort of kicked off the construction.
Gautrain is an overland underground rail system. 15 of the 80 kilometers of track run through tunnels, mainly around Johannesburg. Most tunneling was done using the conventional drill and blast method.
The benefit of drill and blast is that you drill the face. You put in about 1,000 kilograms of explosives and you blast 5 meters away. And so you can actually inspect what you have every 5 meters. But they had 15,000 meters to do, and they were doing it at 5 meters. And it takes you 12 hours. So it takes you 12 hours to drill it, to blast it, to take away, to prime it again, and then blast it another 5. So you could do 10 meters per day.
At one stage, I think we had more people working underground in Johannesburg than there were in the mines around Gauteng.
Because of complex underground conditions, a tunnel boring machine known as a TBM or mole was used between Johannesburg and the outlying suburb of Rosebank. This 885-ton subterranean leviathan is purpose-built for the conditions it's likely to encounter. A special ritual is observed all over the world before a TBM is put to work. Local people have to choose a name, customarily a woman's name for good luck. But the South Africans settled on Imbokodo, meaning rock. The inspiration was an anti-apartheid song from the 1950s. If you strike a woman, you strike a rock. The TBM is like a moving factory. At the front is a rotating cutting wheel nearly 7 meters in diameter, which excavates the tunnel. As it inches forward, it installs precast concrete tunnel lining segments behind it. It took 14 months to burrow its way through 3 kilometers, working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
In our best months, we've achieved about an advance rate of, say, 450 meters for the month, which if you compare that to a normal conventional drill and blast section, which will give you, say, the equivalent of about 150 meters.
But tunneling is notoriously hazardous. While chewing its way under one of Johannesburg's busiest arterial routes, the ground above the TBM suddenly gave way.
I'd taken all the politicians, the Premier, all the ministers to Derby to take over the train, and we were driving on the train on the test track.
Almost a precise moment of my speech, when I was paying tribute to all of the workers in Gautrain, we had a collapse of Oxford Road in Johannesburg, almost at precisely the same moment.
Some residents were left without water for hours, and the road was immediately closed with traffic being diverted. The Johannesburg Roads Agency says it will take at least 2 weeks to fix the road.
The safety of the public nor of any workers was compromised, and in fact the repair was done within 4 to 5 days.
The risk of earth collapsing before the roof has been reinforced is an ever-present danger for tunnellers. And tunnelling continued. A tunnel breakthrough is always a moment of glory, with the excavating teams literally blasting their way into each other's arms. There's also huge relief. Burrowing towards each other from opposite directions requires the most precise underground survey work.
It was an achievement of something which we anticipated for a very long period, and suddenly we were there.
Spirits were so high, some members of the tunnelling team even stripped off to dive into a pool of ice-cold groundwater. But engineering challenges were not confined to beneath the ground. These are the Dolomite Badlands near Pretoria. It's a treacherous place to build anything, let alone a high-tech railway. Gautrain straddles 16 kilometers of this precarious terrain. And the extent of the problem was much worse than anticipated.
Well, the Dolomite is a very difficult rock to found structures on. The rock level is very variable, and within the zone of the Dolomite there are large cavities in the ground.
More structural damage and loss of life occurs on Dolomite than on any other geological formation in southern Africa. Sinkholes can appear at any time with little or no warning.
The people have to be moved because the area they're living in has actually been declared a disaster area. And the reason for that is because it is dolomitic and thus unstable and not safe for human settlement.
The ground here is being virtually beaten into submission. Compacting the soils with these heavyweight pounders is just one way of dealing with dolomite. Pumping a fine mixture of cement, or grout as it's known, into underground voids and cavities is another technique.
Well, we certainly didn't anticipate the amount of grout that we would have to put into the ground. At the start of the project, we thought we would inject approximately 50,000 cubic metres of grout, and at the end we've put 115,000. So we've more than doubled the volume of grout that we've had to put into the ground.
Special research carried out by the Gautrain builders revealed that most sinkholes are less than 15 metres in diameter. In this dangerous area, appropriately named Snake Valley, the solution was to construct ground bridges bigger than any anticipated sinkholes.
We construct basically a bridge on the ground. So each element of that bridge is 180 metres long. It's stressed, the concrete is stressed, so that if a hole forms directly underneath the alignment, we're able to span a hole up to 15 metres in diameter.
The many hills on the Gautrain route posed another challenge. More than 4 kilometres of railway bridges, or viaducts as they're known, were built to overcome this. It took 205 viaducts to cover the distance. They were pre-built for maximum efficiency and slotted together like a giant Lego set. But there's no easy coexistence between cars and cranes. At times, the Gautrain builders had to work deftly to avoid any disruption to the already chaotic traffic situation along the Gautrain route. Engineering ingenuity came to the rescue.
The balance cantilever is a methodology of constructing a bridge which allows us to make big spans.
These bridges can cross the length of a rugby field. It's achieved by building outwards simultaneously in 2 directions from a central support column. No scaffolding is needed, meaning the traffic can flow largely unhindered.
Around each of the piers we have 4 1.5 metre diameter reinforced concrete props, and those are there to take the out of balance loads during the construction stage.
The last 1.5 kilometers into the airport, we took through on a viaduct. You come in, you're down a convenient flight of escalators, and you're right in the midst of the departure level. So hugely convenient. And I think anybody going there now won't believe that the station has not always been there.
Some of Gautrain's other stations were also elevated by viaducts.
So we had the 10 stations, all individual with their own challenges, but each station had the uniqueness of the identity of Gautrain. And what we've done, we've taken the symbol of the tree structure being the columns that are used throughout the stations, and the foliage is the umbrella or the cover, which forms this waveform roof that you have all over the stations. So we've really looked at African symbolism and drawn from it and incorporated this tree and waveform structures into our stations.
For the Gautrain passengers using the system, it will be like walking into a modern shopping center, and therefore a very pleasant, clean, secure environment.
True high-speed rail requires a dedicated track. South African trains have used narrow tracks since colonial times. But to meet the high-speed requirements of the Gautrain, a wider track had to be installed.
65% of all railways in the world use standard gauge. The local gauge in South Africa is Cape gauge. It's, in terms of numbers, it's the old 3'6" gauge or 1065 millimeters. If you've got Cape gauge, you normally can't go over 130 kilometers an hour. Standard gauge, we could go up to 160 quite comfortably.
Another requirement for high-speed travel is smooth, welded rail, and it's crucial to maintain the tracks in top condition.
Yeah, the train will definitely not make a clickety-click sound. It's all over the world a new industry to weld the track together that we call the continuous welded rail. We put the rails on rollers so they're completely stress-free, and we remove the rollers as soon as the rail gets to 35 degrees Celsius, and we fasten them to the sleepers.
The Electrostar rail car, widely used in Britain, was selected for the Gautrain system. Manufactured by the global transportation company Bombardier, the train was customized to meet the relatively harsher operational conditions in South Africa. And it has enhanced propulsion to deal with the steep gradients. But they're different in another respect. Unlike their counterparts in Europe, they have a pointed nose, at Jack van der Merwe's insistence.
In England, there's a rule that because the tunnels are very narrow in London, you have to be able to escape in the front of the train. There isn't enough space if there's an incident on the train to get off the side. So there's a door in the front. So the driver sits next to the door. So if the train comes towards you, it looks as if it's coming backwards. And that I hated. Now, in our country, I'm trying to get the guys out of their BMWs and Mercedes, and I have to have something that has a speed idea. So I said to them, you can do what you like, but the train has to have a nose. It has to have a nose that gives the impression of speed.
I walked around a corner, and all of a sudden, in front of me, stood this African beauty. I actually gave her a kiss. To the consternation of the engineer that was standing beside me. I mean, just couldn't believe it, and I think he afterwards went to rub it off. So.
It was actually quite emotional just to touch it and to say, well, this is now the culmination of something which we've planned for many, many years, and it actually looks fantastic.
From the passenger experience, first of all, personal opinion, and I've been in the business for 20 years, this is one of the most beautiful trains we've built, just in terms of its look, its feel, the branding. If you look through the interior of this train or get a view of it from outside, this is an incredibly sexy train.
We've tested it on the test track that we've got to speeds up to 176, but it will go. If you give it a big bit of track, it will probably get up to 180, 190. But it's designed for comfort and designed for taking passengers. So the way that the train accelerates or brakes is all been predetermined to make it the optimum for passenger comfort.
If you get on this train at OR Tambo, from the wheels starting to turn at the airport into Sandton's, less than 15 minutes journey time. It's going to be smooth, quiet, air-conditioned, safe environment. The system is designed to beat the fastest possible journey time in a road vehicle at any time of day or night. So we're going to be ripping past the traffic all day long, basically.
Gauteng lays on some of the most spectacular electrical storms in the world. But it's a matter of concern for railway operators. Lightning can spell trouble for trains, especially when traveling at high speed.
We're protecting the whole line, the train, the tracks, the equipments, the stations, thanks to one single earthing protection system.
With safety paramount, all operational trains are connected via optical fiber to the central control room.
The control room is the heart of the Gautrain system. It is where the main operator is going to be located together with 4 other operators. Each of the different consoles have a unique function. Some of them are dedicated to stations, others to the depot. Some will be looking at the CCTV which are installed in all the stations and alongside the track everywhere. And once a console will be mainly looking at the power.
There's around about 80 computers on this train controlling everything from the aircon to the doors to everything it does.
Each and every 50 seconds, the driver needs to push this down and up just to communicate with the system that he's still alive. If he doesn't push it, then the train assumes that there is no longer a driver, then it stops automatically.
Strictly speaking, you don't even need a driver. And the way it works is that when you pass a signal, there is in addition a thing between the rails, a little yellow square called a balise. And that balise transmits information into the train, and it takes information from the train as well. And the information will tell the train is, by the way, Mr. Train, you are now cleared to travel at, let us say, 160 kilometers an hour further down this, as far as you want on this track. And by the time it comes to the next balise will have figured out what the signal is ahead of the train and said to catch that signal, you must start reducing speed to 80 kilometers an hour. And so the ATP tells the train what speed to go.
The first phase of Gautrain, the Johannesburg Airport Link, was launched just in time to carry fans for the 2010 Football World Cup. Few had thought it would be possible because of the inevitable delays and setbacks that accompany a project of this scale. With the eyes of the world on South Africa, it was a big publicity coup for Africa's first high-speed train.
And the idea is that you're going to sit on Bemskuman and the train's just going to go past you. And you're going to think, man, maybe I made a mistake, but that won't worry you. But 10 minutes later, when you're still stuck in the same position, the next train's going to come past you. And you're going to know it was wrong. So this train must do high speed and must look as if it's fast. So it's going to do 160, and you're just going to sit there and think the intelligent choice is actually to use public transport.
Oh, awesome.
It's incredibly exciting and just like wow.
Mind-blowing. I think it's awesome. It's going to make our life so much better.
I think public transportation is absolutely amazing, but what it does to a country is something even more amazing. You're going to be able to travel to Pretoria back to Park in 42 minutes. You will be able to look for a job in a location that was never ever a location where you could get it because that was 3 or 4 hours drive away.
For the SADC region, it says land. This thing can be done. And to the continent of Africa, it means that if you look forward, you can have as much technology that can help you.
And we did it. I don't think a lot of people thought we would be able to do it, but we've done it, so I think it's great.
And it's incredible to see how fast that train is and how great the excitement was on the train as well.
Gautrain will show people what public transport is really all about. So people are going to start now to see efficient public transport systems.
People have faith in us being an organized country from a constitutional perspective as well, from a legal environment perspective, and also from the banking environment perspective.
We can do a project in a very professional manner. There is no argument in my mind about how well this has actually been done.
South Africans per se have had a very mixed feelings. A lot of them have been in doubt with it, but I think the majority of South Africans now believe that we are very, very geared towards, and this thing will be an absolute success. Because I know that we need it in this country. It's a type of infrastructure that's been long outstanding, and more and more people who speak to day by day are very, very positive about this project.
Because it has lived up to the objectives that we set for ourselves. We might not have had the experience, but we have gained experience in the process. And at the end of it, we're all different people, different from at the time when we started. We have learned. They will see the message that actually the big giant is now standing up.